colleagues, and what a beautiful Alberta day. What a great summer day in a great Alberta summer. I'm delighted to be here with these ministers who are part of the renewal of Alberta's government at a time of renewal for our province. We've been through 16 incredibly tough months, a time of real adversity. And together, Albertans have overcome a once-in-a-century public health crisis and a once-in-a-century challenge to our economy. But now Alberta is the first province to be fully open. We are leading Canada out of the pandemic and leading Canada in economic growth. Today, we've made some changes to the leadership team in Alberta's government to really put the pedal to the metal on our economic growth strategy and Alberta's recovery plan to fire on all cylinders, to make sure that we recover not only from the COVID recession, but from the last 5 tough years. And there are all sorts of positive signs. Just yesterday, CIBC confirming the view of other banks and think tanks that Alberta is leading Canada in economic growth this year and will do so again next year, and doing that by a country mile. But it's not going to happen by itself. It's going to require the right kind of open for business policies to get people back to work, to build this province, to ensure a strong future for our largest and historic industries, while also diversifying Alberta's economy. So together with our other ministers, this renewed team can help lead the province in that direction. I want to thank Minister Sawney for her 2 great years of compassionate leadership at Community and Social Services, and now agreeing to take up one of the most important economic ministries in Alberta's government, transportation, which to oversee the largest ever building program in Alberta history. The lion's share of the $21 billion Alberta government infrastructure build that we're going to see over the next 3 years, getting people back to work and building the architecture of our future economy. And Rajan comes to public service with a master's in business administration, with leadership roles in the private sector, including in the oil and gas industry. And so I know that she's ready to roll when it comes to building the province, including managing the province's $1.5 billion commitment for the completion of the Calgary LRT Green Line project. I also want to welcome back to the ministry Tanya Furr, MLA for Calgary-Pagan, as Associate Minister for Red Tape Reduction. Cutting job-killing red tape was one of the central commitments that we made to Albertans in the last election. Our goal has been to cut that job-killing red tape by at least 1/3 in this term of government. And I want to thank outgoing Associate Minister Hunter and his team for their great work. We are now at, I believe, 17% reduction, which is over halfway there. We've eliminated nearly 120,000 Alberta government regulations, but there's more work to be done. We've got to put the pedal to the metal, and Tanya is determined to lead that process so that we become the freest and fastest moving economy in North America. I want to welcome Nate Horner to Executive Council. He's a strong representative of his constituency and has deep roots in rural Alberta as a rancher, and we've created this new position of Associate Minister for Rural Economic Development. He'll be working with Minister Schweitzer at Jobs, Economy and Innovation to ensure a particular focus on wealth creation, job creation and development in rural Alberta. For example, he'll be working with Minister Glubish on a very bold strategy for rural broadband to ensure that rural Albertans are fully connected to the digital economy. And he'll be working with Minister Dreeshen on the largest renewal of our irrigation infrastructure in over 6 decades, an $840 million game-changing initial investment in irrigation renewal with potential other major projects, and so much more to come. Thank you very much, Nate, for stepping up to lead in this way. I want to thank Mohammed Yassin, who is going from being a parliamentary secretary for immigration to an associate minister for immigration and multiculturalism. And Mohammed will be working, by the way, Mohammed is a remarkable man. He has an advanced engineering degree and an MBA. And I think a couple of other degrees. He was one of the senior most engineers at Imperial Oil for like 25 years. This is a man of incredible intelligence, and he's going to be working with Minister Copping on rolling out our promised Alberta Advantage immigration strategy, which was a platform commitment. Now, a lot of that work has already been done. It was kind of put on hold during the pandemic because immigration was largely suspended. But I believe that what we're seeing now from businesses is one of the biggest emerging challenges in our economy is skill and labor shortages. And I think that in the next 6 to 12 months, that will become the biggest challenge in our province, a good challenge. And Mohammed, working with Jason on the Alberta Advantage immigration strategy, will help to address that. But there's another issue that I've asked Mohammed to focus on. Of course, the implementation of the Fairness for Newcomers action plan, which is to knock down barriers that exist to the full inclusion of new Albertans in our labor force. The unfair regulatory practices of credentialing agencies that have too many doctors driving taxi cabs. That problem, Mohammed has already done a lot of work on our Fairness for Newcomers action plan. He's going to double down on that now. But the other thing I've asked him to focus on is the challenge we are seeing in terms of expressions of racism in our society. We have seen just appalling attacks on Albertans from racial and ethnic minority backgrounds, including, as you know, a member of our cabinet here, a member of her family. And we must do everything we can to identify what are the causes of this, what are the patterns, and what more can Alberta do to ensure the safety, security, and peacefulness for all people to live, realize their potential in Alberta. So I've asked Mohammed, in the capacity as Associate Minister for Multiculturalism, to work with Minister Madhu over at Justice, and as well as right across government, to do whatever we can to address the scourge of racism in our society. Whitney Isaac, I want to welcome as Chief Government Whip, a critical role in coordinating the government team and its action plan through the legislature, but also we now have a dedicated minister for the status of women, which I think is going to be a key part of the recovery strategy. We know that women have been disproportionately affected by the COVID economic crisis, and she'll be working with right across government to ensure that women are fully included in the dynamic recovery in Alberta's economic future. Thank you to MLA Ron Orr, one of the veterans in our caucus, for stepping up as Minister for Culture. Ron was a very effective culture critic in opposition. He is a man of great thoughtfulness, passion, and conviction. He is committed to ensuring that the cultural industries play a key role in Alberta's economic recovery. But I'm also going to mandate him to focus on one of the recommendations of the Fair Deal panel from about a year ago, and that was recommendation 25, to affirm Alberta's cultural, economic, and political uniqueness in law and government policy through an Alberta identity strategy, to make sure that Albertans know about our past, celebrate what's best about it, and have that civic literacy that is so important for our future. Thank you to Mike Ellis for his service as Chief Government Whip over the past 2 challenging years. Mike, as you know, is a former sergeant in the Calgary Police Service, and in that role, he led a squad in downtown Calgary dealing with many people coping with challenges like addictions and mental health challenges, and he's very passionate about and compassionate about ensuring that those people facing mental illness and addictions have all of the support they need to recover and to lead good lives. And so I want to thank Mike for stepping up as Associate Minister for Mental Health and Addictions. As you know, this is the first time that, in this government, that position has existed, a specific focus on mental health and addictions in the Alberta government. It was a key platform commitment. I want to thank Jason Lewan and his team for their tremendous work over the past 2 years in developing our recovery-oriented system with the continuum of care, with historic, unprecedented investments in helping people to escape the trap of addictions, and I know Mike will carry that on with real passion. And finally, thanks to Jason Lewan for now moving to become Minister of Community and Social Services. It's actually a perfect fit for Minister Lewan. He is a trained social worker, and he was a senior manager with the City of Calgary in their community outreach to agencies dealing with social challenges. So he's going to he's job ready on day one for the challenging task of ensuring that vulnerable Albertans have the support they need, including for those who want to enter the labor force. We want to make sure that, for example, persons with disabilities have the support and the training, the equipment that they need to get into the labor force, and that people who might be on income support have the support and training opportunities that they need as well. We're going to need the talents of all Albertans as we move into this period of dynamic economic recovery, and Jason will be in part responsible for making that happen. I should also acknowledge that we have appointed Joseph Scow, MLA for Cardston-Siksika, formerly Deputy Whip. He is now going to be the Deputy Government House Leader. It's a bit of a change from at least recent practice in Alberta, where several ministers have filled that role. Joseph will be the dedicated Government House Leader and helping to move keep our promises to Albertans by moving our legislative agenda through the Assembly. And I want to thank Brad Rutherford, MLA for Leduc-Beaumont, a former Edmonton Police Service officer, for stepping up to work with Whitney as Deputy Government Whip. And finally, I'm pleased to announce today that Pam Livingston, effective immediately, is the Chief of Staff to the Premier. She's been acting as the Deputy Chief of Staff for the past few months, and I want to thank Larry Komeyer for having filled that a critical role over the past 6 really tough months as Acting Chief of Staff. He returns to his original appointment as Principal Secretary to the Premier, focusing on our biggest files, particularly our priority economic files. The two of them, Pam and Larry, are a fantastic team. So altogether, this is an important sign of renewal in Alberta's government as we move forward to take on the challenges of leading Canada in economic growth, continuing to deliver on our campaign commitments to Alberta, fighting for a fair deal, building a strong Alberta. And with that, I'm happy to take your questions.
So we will start on the phones today. I'll just remind everyone it'll be one question and one follow-up. Operator, can you please put through our first caller?
First question is from Rick Bell with the Calgary Sun. Go ahead, Rick.
Good morning, Premier. You talked about this being a time for renewal, and that's the reason for the cabinet shuffle. But how much of this cabinet shuffle is also about, or in reaction to, some of the discontent, dissenters, unrest within the United Conservative Caucus?
It's not about
dealing with that issue.
Yeah, it's not about that, Rick. We put all of that behind us. It's obvious that Albertans were divided in how best to address the pandemic crisis. And in our caucus, we saw people representing a diverse range of views, as you would expect in a democracy. I know the NDP was shocked and appalled that elected representatives might actually represent their constituents and have a range of views, but I actually think that's democracy. I can tell you, Rick, that since our government announced the Open for Summer plan, and we've led Canada out of the pandemic, the first province with no public health restrictions outside of hospitals. Since we've done that, I've had a real sense of a renewed sense of unity and common purpose in the United Conservative Caucus. We have a great new caucus chair, Nathan Newdorf, who's committed to that, and I know that the new government whip, Whitney Isaac, and her team will work closely with him on that. But I really think that is all behind us. Today is about the future, not the past, and it's about doing it, like I say, putting the pedal to the metal on our economic recovery and on keeping our commitments. Every now and then, a government needs to renew its team. It's a good and natural thing to do, and that's what we're doing here today.
And do you have a follow-up, Rick?
Yes. Conservatives are generally seen as being in favor of smaller government, and your cabinet now is quite a bit larger. How do you reconcile those two things?
Well, actually, we're not creating any new government ministries here, so there's no additional bureaucracy. We're simply having a couple of folks who are working as MLAs and parliamentary secretaries to step up and help carry the workload of ministers. So it's more hands on deck to get more done for Albertans without creating an ounce of additional bureaucracy.
Operator, can you please put through our next caller?
Next is Lisa Corbella with Post Media. Go ahead, please.
Good morning. Thank you for taking my call, Premier. There's a saying, in politics that timing is everything. And so I think back to the beginning of this pandemic, when you and your government tore up the contract with Alberta's doctors, just 1 month before COVID-19 lockdown happened. And so I'm just wondering, in retrospect, if you regret your actions of February 2020. And I'm also wondering why you didn't use this opportunity of a cabinet shuffle to move Health Minister Shandro out of health and into a new portfolio so that doctors and nurses can start fresh with a new minister and maybe have a bit more confidence in the minister.
Well, Alicia, first of all, I don't agree with your characterization. The master agreement with the Medical Association allowed for government to terminate it. We had sought to negotiate a new master agreement and didn't have anything like a positive response in the fall and into the winter of 2019-2020. As you know, physician compensation is the single largest item of Alberta's budget. We spend 10% of our budget on physician compensation and a quarter of the healthcare budget. And that's understandable because we value our physicians. We want them not just to be paid fairly, but to be paid generously. But in the midst of an ongoing fiscal crisis, we also need some budget management tools. We can't allow any part of government spending, let alone the largest portion of it, to go up annually by 6% or more. And we simply have wanted to work out a solution with the Medical Association where our physicians are compensated, perhaps even they are compensated better than in any other province, and we're happy to carry that on. But we do need some management tools so that we can ensure the sustainability of healthcare in the future. That's the challenge that Minister Shandro has had. As you know, he had an interim agreement or agreement in principle with the AMA. Unfortunately, it was narrowly failed on a ratification vote. There are ongoing discussions, and Minister Shandro is I think deeply engaged in those discussions. I think he has done a tremendous job of helping to lead Alberta through this brutal pandemic. We've ended up with a COVID per capita fatality rate that is 27% lower than Canada's fatality rate. That is about 1/3 lower than the fatality rates in Europe and the United States. And we've managed to do that with less damaging public health restrictions. I won't pretend that we got everything perfectly right, but I think that speaks to a strong record on the part of Alberta and Albertans in facing the challenge of the pandemic. And now Minister Shandro can take 2 years of hard-earned experience to apply that to moving forward with our surgical initiative, radically to reduce surgical wait times, to put the patient at the center of the medical system, also to implement some of the recommendations of the Ernst & Young report that we committed to in the last election on eliminating waste and inefficiency in the health system so we can move those dollars to patient care. So I thank Tyler for his hard work and look forward to his continued leadership in that critical portfolio.
Do you have a follow-up, Leisha?
Yeah, I was just thinking about the red tape reduction file, and Minister Hunter before that, and you were talking about how much has been reduced in government bureaucracy and red tape, a 17% reduction, and yet you shuffled him out with no place to go. And so I'm just wondering why that happened.
Well, as I said, Grant's done a very good job there, and I appreciate it. Under his leadership, we've gone from an F to an A on the CFIB's red tape report card, and I look forward to continuing to work with Grant, and I'm sure we'll find new ways for him to make a particular contribution to the work of this government. But Leash, at the end of the day, there needs to be renewal every now and then within a government. That comes down. Whoever's in my job has the tough call to make of ensuring that there is some movement, and that people who have been serving capably as private members have an opportunity to demonstrate their ability in ministerial positions. But not every one of the 60-some government MLAs can serve in a ministerial capacity. So, regrettably, there have to be changes every now and then, but I am really confident that we have in Minister Furr, who comes from an oil industry background and is an industry professional, and who's a very determined person, will have a renewed focus on red tape reduction, a key part of our economic growth strategy.
Okay, we'll now come to questions on the ground. If you want to go ahead, Janet.
Hi there, Janet French from the CBC. I just wanted to ask about the negotiations with the United Nurses of Alberta right now. So, when this news came out after the first day of bargaining, the UNA said, well, actually their position has changed. Before they were seeking wage freezes, now the government/AHS wants wage rollbacks, but yet we've seen the demands on the health system obviously be quite high during the pandemic, and now you've got this surgical initiative, which is going to take a lot of personnel, and now we're seeing bed shortages result in some closures in some rural hospitals. So why now for seeking a rollback for nurse wages?
Well, first of all, let me say how much all Albertans appreciate the professionalism and care provided by nurses and other frontline healthcare workers, particularly during the COVID pandemic. And that's one of the reasons we extended the COVID wage top-up to nurses, is the only category of people who are not low-wage workers to benefit from that, just as a small expression of gratitude on behalf of Albertans. I would refer you back, Janet, to Dr. Janice McKinnon's panel on Alberta's finances, where she underscored that the wage costs in Alberta's health system are substantially higher than in other provinces. I think in the case of nurses, for example, that on average their compensation is about 5.6% higher than the average across Canada. We have a $16-17 billion deficit. We have had a string of the largest deficits in the province's history. This government is not going to squeeze more money out of taxpayers by raising their taxes to deal with that. We just need to operate more efficiently. And of course, that has to include the most expensive healthcare system in Canada, which is why we're in these negotiations going to seek some savings that we can then reallocate to patient care. Any dollar that we save in collective bargaining negotiations, or for that matter, in a new agreement with the Medical Association, 100% of those savings will be kept in the health system to improve patient care, to help fund things like the initiative to reduce surgical wait times. So these are negotiations. I don't want to comment too much on it. I want to respect the process. But this has been the mandate, the mandate to which you've referred, that's been the mandate of the government, of cabinet for months now. So nothing has changed in that respect.
Just switching gears to the person we're not seeing here today or staying on cabinet, which is Leela Ahir, who is a woman with a fair amount of experience in the legislature. She also was one of the people who asked you to apologize for your appearance on the balcony, in violation of public health restrictions at the time. I'm curious if there's any connection there. How do you explain her absence now from cabinet after her portfolio was relatively scandal-free?
Well, as I say, this is a time for renewal, and that means there has to be some changes. Appreciate Leela's contribution to the government in the past, and I very much hope so in the future. But not everybody in caucus can serve in a ministerial role at the same time. I think it's important that we have opportunities for renewal, and that's what today represents, is an opportunity for renewal. But from time to time, there will be changes made to ministry. And, it's there's a lot of different factors that go into putting together the best possible collection of ministers at any given time. This is not about that or any particular incident. This is just about an opportunity for renewal. And I've described why we've chosen these ministers in my opening remarks.
Hi, Premier Michelle Bellefontaine from CBC. I just wanted to follow up on Janet's question. I mean, we have heard that, of course, we know that Ms. Ahir was a critic of yours, and we've also heard that Mr. Hunter was also a critic of yours. So I'm wondering if you can explain to Albertans how this is not a punishment for both of these individuals.
Well, there are people standing behind me who were critical of the government publicly in its COVID response, who are now newly in the ministry and serving in executive council. So I always invite constructive criticism. And but at the end of the day, of course, we always have to work as a team to get the job done in a professional way. And this is an opportunity for renewal. From time to time, you're going to have any government that wants to show that it is dynamic is going to provide opportunities for private members to offer service in a ministerial capacity. And that means moving people from time to time. I'll tell you this, I value enormously the work that private members of the legislature do, government members do. And clearly, because standing behind me are a number of folks who for the past 2 years have served in that capacity. And so there's always an opportunity for new ways to contribute. I don't see this kind of hierarchically, that ministerial service is not the only form of public or government service. And we've got a lot of private members serving the government in critical capacities. I mean, Minister Isaac, who's just joining us as whip, has, just to pick out one example, has done amazing work assisting the Minister of the Environment on critical issues around climate policy and energy and the environment. I could go right down the line here of these members who have all made very substantial contributions, so I expect that will be the case for the two members who today are departing Executive Council.
And just as a follow-up, I think one of the more curious appointments that you made is Ron Orr as Culture Minister, and I'm wondering what background Mr. Orr has in culture industries, whether it's music, theater, film, whatever.
Well, Mr. Orr was the shadow minister for culture in the official opposition, and when I became leader of the opposition, I reappointed him to that position after having sat down with him and seen firsthand his deep knowledge about and commitment to the cultural industries. Ron was a tenacious advocate for the culture industries in opposition, and that's why he's always been in the back of my mind as somebody who's passionate about that. And in particular, in addition to ensuring that cultural industries have participate fully in the economic recovery, I also want Ron to focus on the recommendation of the Fair Deal panel, which is an Alberta identity strategy to celebrate those aspects of Alberta's culture that are unique. And I think that Ron, bringing a rural Alberta perspective, really understands that. And I'm looking forward to working with him on that initiative.
Thanks, Premier. Catherine Gurkowski with Alberta Today. You had mentioned the immigration strategy and how Alberta was hit hardest by the pandemic economically. I'm wondering what, if anything, changes from your original plan in 2019 for the immigration strategy? Well,
we did articulate 4 new designated streams for the Alberta Immigrant Nominee Program in the platform with respect to the Alberta Advantage Immigration Strategy. And stay tuned, we will be launching 3 of those streams, I believe, later this month. Mohammed has been working on that with Minister Copping. We were ready to roll with those about 14 months ago, but then we got into the pandemic, travel was stopped, and frankly, with 25% unemployment in the second quarter of last year, it didn't make any sense to be welcoming immigrants to face unemployment during a catastrophic recession. So now everything has changed. Now we are hearing about labor shortages, and now we want to launch those innovative new programs, including the startup visa, which will offer fast-track work permits leading to permanent residency for foreign nationals who want to start a business in this province. And we're really going to focus that on foreign nationals living in the U.S. in the tech sector doing tech startups, but they can't get their green card because of the broken U.S. immigration system. That's one exciting stream. Another one will be the Rural Entrepreneurship Program to connect future immigrants with business opportunities to start or buy businesses, especially in rural Alberta, where there's a population retention challenge. And then thirdly, the Rural Renewal Program. But we're also committed to the foreign student program that will invite graduating foreign students, if they decide to start a business, to stay in Alberta. There will be other reforms to be announced by Mohammed and Jason, and they also will be hosting the Alberta, the Fairness for Newcomers Summit this summer that will call to account the professional licensing bodies that have not been giving a fair pathway to credential recognition for newcomers.
And several of these ministries now have more associate ministries, and I'm wondering, as all these roles are broken up into chunks, where does tourism land?
Well, tourism is situated at Jobs, Economy and Innovation under Minister Schweitzer's leadership, and he does have the support of a parliamentary secretary for small business and tourism. That's MLA Martin Long, and it's a very important part of our recovery strategy. And by the way, let me segue to say that the first issue I raised with Prime Minister Trudeau yesterday in our meeting was to urge him to reopen the borders for safe travel. We see almost every industry here in Alberta firing on all cylinders. Obviously oil and gas, but forestry, agriculture, tech, venture capital, film and television, manufacturing, big new industries like hydrogen. But there's one big industry that's being held back by the federal government. 800,000 workers in travel and tourism cannot get back to work. We have one of the largest tourism industries in the country here proportionately. So I'm urging the federal government to follow the recommendation of the provinces and allow foreign travelers who are fully vaccinated and have a negative COVID test to come here without a quarantine requirement. That is, it's not scientific. If you're fully vaccinated and you get a negative test, please come here and enjoy Alberta. We have begun, by the way, our tourism promotion campaign. We're the first province in Canada to be advertising in other provinces, welcoming fellow Canadians to come and enjoy this magnificent province. And we have added $23 million to the budget for Tourism Alberta this year and for the next 2 years. We also have a brilliant new CEO of Tourism Alberta, David Goldstein, with whom I was chatting last night. So tourism is a big part of our future focus, but we got to get aircraft back in the air, bringing visitors here.
I'll just note we have time for 2 more questions.
Hi, Premier. Jeremy Thompson with CTV News in Edmonton here. Just wondering about some changes that you decided not to make during this cabinet shuffle here. Touched on Health Minister Shandro already here, but a few other ministers have had some heavy criticism from their work from the public. I'm thinking of Education Minister LaGrange, perhaps even Ministers Nixon and Taves. So given that analysis by the public about their performance, would seem that you're making your cabinet decisions on, political ideology rather than performance. Is that not the case?
No, nothing could be further from the truth. And I find it interesting that CTV believes it has some kind of it represents broad public opinion, that you could speak for the entire Alberta public. This is a democracy and a responsible government in the Westminster system, where I'm entrusted with appointing people to executive responsibilities based on their ability in a number of criteria. I think all of those ministers have done a fantastic job. They have my complete support. This has been a challenging time, and I don't think it should surprise anyone that certain special interest groups that want unlimited increases in taxpayer spending would be opposed to a government that is trying prudently to manage the province's finances. That goes without saying. You know, you go back to the Klein government that got re-elected 4 times with historic majorities, that cut government spending by 20%, whereas this government is doing it by like 2 or 3%. That government was re-elected 4 times, and the same special interest groups who said the same things that you have just repeated word for word wanted all of the Klein ministers fired. They wanted Ralph Klein fired. But you know who kept hiring them back? The voters of Alberta.
Just respectfully, you know, our special interest groups, would you consider the Teachers Association and you know, Nurses Union and those sorts of groups?
Unions that benefit from government, from taxpayer dollars, always want more taxpayer dollars. That's not exactly a revelation. Our job as government is to ensure high-quality public services, supporting the great people who deliver those services, but not allowing union bosses to dictate the direction of the province's finances, because if we did that, we'd be in the poorhouse forever.
Bonjour, Monsieur le Premier ministre, Audrey Neveu de Radio-Canada. Content de vous voir en personne enfin. I'm going to ask you to repeat just 2 questions you said, but in French, please.
Sure.
La grande absente qu'on voit aujourd'hui, c'est Lila Ahir, mais il y a 1 mois à peine, elle vous a demandé de vous excuser pour le dîner que vous avez eu avec des ministres dans lesquels vous ne respectiez pas les règles sanitaires. Il n'y a pas vraiment eu d'erreur dans son ministère, donc on peut se demander si c'est la raison de son départ aujourd'hui.
Non, pas du tout. De temps en temps, il faut que le gouvernement avoir un renouvellement des personnages. C'est ce que nous faisons aujourd'hui avec le réaniement du cabinet des ministres. Et malheureusement, nous ne pouvons pas avoir un conseil de ministres avec une 60aine des députés. Il faut avoir des changements de temps en temps. Et j'ai confiance dans cette équipe et j'ai hâte de travailler avec les anciens ministres dans les nouvelles fonctions.
Deux de vos nouveaux venus aujourd'hui viennent de circonscriptions rurales. Est-ce que vous tentez d'avoir un peu plus d'attention tournée vers les circonscriptions rurales, peut-être pour les apaiser aussi?
Non, je crois que largement, il y a un bon équilibre en ce qui concerne les régions de l'Alberta dans notre cabinet. Évidemment, nous manquons les députés à Edmonton, avec l'exception de M. Madou, mais il y a pas mal de ministres dans le conseil qui viennent de Calgary. Mais écoutez, une quarantaine de nos députés viennent hors de Calgary et hors d'Edmonton, et il faut que ces régions-là soient représentées dans le Conseil des ministres. Et je suis fier de nommer M. Horner, par exemple, ministre pour le développement économique rural, parce que une grande majorité des richesses de l'Alberta viennent des régions, des industries de ressources, par exemple. Et c'est important de s'assurer une future économique prospère pour les communautés rurales en Alberta. Okay, thank you very much, everyone. I appreciate it. Enjoy the beautiful day. I'm melting out here with the sun.